I want to be honest with you about something before I start. I'm not someone who needs to be the center of attention. I never have been. I grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, in a house where the windows fogged up every November, and the heating bills made my mother sigh every single month like it was a personal insult. I know what it means to make do. I know what it means to be practical, to be quiet, to be the one who figures things out without making a fuss. But there's a difference between being low maintenance and being invisible. It took me until I was 22 years old to understand that difference. And it took one specific Tuesday in September to make it impossible to ignore. I'm the older one. My brother is 4 years younger than me, and his name is the one my parents say first when they introduce themselves to new people. Not in a mean way, they would tell you. Just naturally, just the way things worked out. My brother Theo, no, that's been used. Let me tell you about my brother. His name is Felix. Felix Okafor Dumont. Our father is from Lagos originally. Our mother is French-Canadian from Sudbury. And somehow between the two of them they produced me. Quiet and organized and already reading chapter books at age 5. And Felix, who came into the world like a party nobody had planned for, and everyone was immediately glad had happened anyway. I love my brother. I need you to know that right away. None of what happened is Felix's fault. He was just the kind of person who filled a room, and I was the kind of person who made sure the room was ready before anyone arrived. My father, Emeka, worked for the city, roads and infrastructure. He left the house at 6:45 every morning, in the same jacket for 11 years. My mother, José, taught French immersion at the elementary school, 3 blocks over. They were not bad people. I want to be clear about that. They paid their taxes and brought casseroles to sick neighbors and remembered to vote. But somewhere in the way they organized their love, there was a drawer that got stuck, and my name was on the label, and no one ever bothered to pull it open all the way. When I was 13, I started waking up early on weekends to shovel the driveway before my father had to. Not because anyone asked me to, because I had figured out, the way kids figure things out without being told, that I needed to earn my place in a way Felix did not. Felix could leave his hockey bag in the hallway for 4 days, and my mother would step around it like it was a beloved piece of furniture. If I left my school bag on a kitchen chair, I heard about it within the hour. I told myself it was because I was older. I told myself it was because Felix was still figuring things out. I got very good at telling myself stories that made the math work out even when the math didn't add up. By the time I was in high school, I had a part-time job at a Tim Hortons 2 kilometers from the house. I took the bus there and back. I opened on weekends, which meant I was up at 5 in the morning while everyone else slept. I put every paycheck into a savings account I had opened myself at the TD branch on Queen Street. My goal was university. My parents had made it clear, not cruelly, not in one big conversation, but in a dozen small ways over the years, that money for school was not something they could guarantee. OSAP would help, they said. You can apply for bursaries, they said. You're smart, you'll figure it out. Felix played rep hockey. The fees alone were $4,000 a year. There were tournaments in Barrie, in Kingston, in Ottawa. The family went to most of them. I went to none of mine, because I did not have a thing that required the family to travel. I had a report card that came home and got placed on the counter, and was never put on the fridge. I graduated high school with a 91 average, and 3 reference letters from teachers who, looking back, probably saw more in me than I was able to see in myself at the time. The acceptance I got from Western was for their management and organizational studies program. It came in an email on a Wednesday afternoon, while I was on my break at work, standing in the parking lot in February, with my coat half zipped, because I'd been in a rush. I read it twice. I did not cry. I thought about going inside and telling my manager, but she was in the middle of something and honestly I wasn't sure what reaction I was looking for. I texted my mother. She replied 40 minutes later, "That's great, honey. Are you coming for dinner?" That was it. That was the whole conversation. I told myself that was enough. I got very, very good at telling myself that. I moved into residence in September, sharing a room with a girl named Beatrix, no, already used, with a girl named Odette, who was from Oakville and had strong opinions about coffee and somehow became one of the best people I've ever known. The first few months were hard in the way that first months always are, and I threw myself into it the way I threw myself into everything. Head down, organized, no fuss. I came home for Thanksgiving. Felix was there, bigger than I remembered, louder. My mother had made tourtière because my grandmother's recipe, the one she kept in the old recipe box that lived on top of the fridge. The table felt full and warm and almost normal, and I thought, maybe I'd been unfair. Maybe I'd been holding on to something that wasn't as heavy as I'd made it. Then my father said, over dessert, that he and my mother were thinking of refinancing the house to help Felix with his hockey training. A private skills coach. Ice time. Possibly a camp in Alberta in the summer. I put my fork down. I had $37,000 in student debt at that point. I had not asked them for $1. I did not say anything at dinner. I learned early that saying something at dinner never went the way I needed it to. My mother would get quiet and hurt. My father would explain things slowly, patiently, in a way that made me feel like I was being unreasonable for having feelings in the first place. And somehow by the end of the conversation, the problem would be me. My expectations, my attitude, my inability to understand that things were complicated. So I ate my pie and I helped clear the table, and I drove back to London the next morning and I did not say a word. Second year was better. I got a campus job at the library. I applied for every bursary I could find, filling out the forms on Sunday mornings with coffee and my laptop and a stubbornness that I had inherited from somewhere. I got 2. Combined, they covered almost a full semester. I slept better after that. Not a lot, but a little. I graduated in April of my 4th year. Convocation was on a Thursday. The ceremony was at Budweiser Gardens in London, which always struck me as a slightly odd place to hand out degrees. But there you go. I had my gown. I had my hood in the faculty colors. I had my name on the program in small black print. I had reserved 4 tickets. 1 for my parents, 1 for Felix, 1 for my grandmother Mamie, who had driven up from Sudbury and was the person I most wanted to see in that building. The night before, my mother called. Felix had a tournament. It had been rescheduled. Something about ice availability at the arena in Nepean. It was the same weekend. My parents were going to Felix's tournament. They were sorry. They had looked at flights, but the connection through Toronto was complicated, and the tournament hotel was already booked. Mamie would still be there. Mamie would take pictures. They were so proud of me. I stood in my apartment in my sweater and my socks and I looked at the wall for a while. My mother said, "You know we'd be there if we could." I said, "I know." I said, "It's fine." I hung up and I sat on the floor of my kitchen, right there on the tile, and I thought about the $37,000. I thought about the Thanksgiving table and the hockey training fund. I thought about the Tim Hortons parking lot in February. I thought about every school concert and every parent-teacher night, and every small invisible thing that had accumulated over 22 years into something too large to pretend was nothing. I did not call anyone. I straightened up because I had things to do, and there was nobody to sit on the floor with anyway. Convocation was a Thursday morning. Odette and her family were there. Her mother hugged me like I was also hers. Mamie was there in her good coat, the navy one she saves for occasions, and she held my face in her hands outside the building after and said, "Je suis tellement fière de toi, ma belle. I am so proud of you, my beautiful girl." I took a photo with her. I looked happy in it. I actually was, in the specific way that comes from doing something hard and finishing it, even when the people who were supposed to witness it chose something else. My parents watched a video of the ceremony I sent them that night. My mother sent back a string of heart emojis. My father called and left a voicemail that was warm and slightly formal, the way his voicemails always were. He said he was proud. He said he hoped we could celebrate soon. I did not call back that day. I saved the voicemail though. I'm not sure why. 2 weeks after convocation, I started a position at a healthcare policy consulting firm in Toronto, entry level, but with real work attached to it. I moved into a basement apartment in Leslieville with 1 window that got afternoon light and a landlord who fixed things when they broke, which I had learned by then was not something to take for granted. I settled in. I built routines. I made a budget on a spreadsheet and I stuck to it, because I had been making budgets on spreadsheets since I was 16 and the habit was bone deep by now. I took the streetcar to work. I found a Ukrainian bakery 2 blocks from my apartment and bought bread there every Saturday morning. I called Mamie every Sunday evening. I was, by most observable measures, doing well. What I was not doing was talking about any of it. Not the Thanksgiving table. Not the hockey fund. Not the empty seats at convocation. I filed it somewhere internal and locked the drawer, and told myself that the people who loved me were complicated and imperfect and doing their best. I told myself that holding on to it would only hurt me, not them. And then, in November, something happened that made the drawer impossible to keep closed. I got a letter from the National Student Loan Service Center. There was a discrepancy in my repayment status. Someone had submitted documentation claiming that I had received financial support from my family during my studies. A contribution that, if accurate, would have altered my eligibility for 2 of the bursaries I had received. The letter asked me to respond within 30 days with supporting documentation. I read it 3 times at my kitchen table. I called the NSLSC the next morning. A patient woman named, I don't remember her name, just her voice, very steady, explained what had been submitted. It was a form, signed, with my parents' address on it. I sat in my chair and felt something go very still inside me. I don't know what they thought would happen. Maybe they didn't think it through. Maybe they were angry about something I'd said, or hadn't said, or maybe the distance had curdled into something neither of us had named. I will never fully understand what moved them to do it. What I know is that it was not true. I had not received money from them. I had received their house for Christmas dinners and their complicated love, and a lot of silence when I needed words, but not money. Not $1. I had the bank statements to prove it. I had the records. 22 years of low-key self-sufficiency had turned out to be excellent preparation for bureaucratic warfare. I disputed the claim. It took 2 months. I had to submit 3 years of bank statements, a signed declaration, a letter from my employer confirming my start date and salary, and a conversation with a caseworker who was, blessedly, thorough and fair. I won the dispute. My bursaries were confirmed. My repayment status was restored. I lost 2 months of sleep doing it. There were nights in December when I'd be at my kitchen table at midnight, cross-referencing documents, and I would think, what kind of people do this? And then I would think, mine. My people did this. The people who came to Felix's hockey tournaments in Nepean and couldn't make it to London for a Thursday morning. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not Odette, not Mamie. I was ashamed, which I know now was the wrong feeling to have. But shame doesn't ask permission before it moves in. I kept going to work. I kept buying bread on Saturdays. I kept calling Mamie on Sundays and letting her tell me about her neighbors and her garden, and what the priest had said that week that made everyone laugh. I did not mention my parents. She did not ask. The following spring, something shifted. It started small. A colleague at work. A woman about 10 years older than me. The kind of person who asks real questions and waits for actual answers. Asked me one afternoon why I never talked about my family. We were eating lunch in the little room near the photocopier that everyone pretended was a lunchroom. I said, "It's complicated," she said. "Most things that are worth talking about are." I went home that evening, and I sat with that for a while. I had spent my entire life making myself easy to manage, making myself small enough that I didn't create problems, didn't ask for things, didn't take up space that wasn't explicitly offered. I had gotten so good at it that I had started doing it to myself. I was shrinking in my own apartment, in my own head, in the privacy of my own life where nobody was even watching. I started writing, not for anyone, at first. Just in the Notes app on my phone, on the streetcar going home from work. Small things. The Tim Hortons parking lot in February, the Thanksgiving table, the tiles on the kitchen floor in Leslieville, the NSLSC letter. I wrote without editing, without worrying about who might read it, and something in me started to loosen, very slowly, the way ice goes in early April. Not all at once, just at the edges. A few months later, I made a simple blog. I have no idea why that particular night felt different from any other night, but it did. I wrote one post, 3 paragraphs about what it felt like to sit in a university gymnasium and watch other people's parents cry while mine were 4 hours away, watching my brother's hockey tournament. I did not name anyone. I did not perform anger. I just wrote it down exactly as it had happened. Within 2 weeks, over 8,000 people had read it. I got comments from women who said things like, "I thought I was the only one. I've never read something that sounded so exactly like my own life." How do you keep going? I answered every single one. The blog grew. More posts, more people. A woman who runs a podcast about family estrangement and chosen family reached out after reading something I'd written about the difference between forgiving someone and letting them rewrite the story. We talked for almost 2 hours. She asked if I would come on as a guest. I said yes. That episode, when it came out, got more listener mail than anything they'd put out that year. I found that out later, from her, in a message that made me sit down on my couch and just look at the ceiling for a while. My parents heard the podcast. I found out because Felix texted me. Just, "Hey, Mom and Dad heard your podcast. Can we talk sometime?" I said yes. "When you're ready." My mother sent me a message on Facebook a few days later. It said that people only ever heard one side of things, and that she hoped I knew they had always done their best, and that she was proud of me even if it didn't always come out right. I read it several times. I thought about everything I could say. I had a lot to say. I had 22 years of things to say, but I realized, sitting there in my apartment with the afternoon light coming through the one good window, that I didn't need her to understand. I didn't need to win the room. The room wasn't the point anymore. I archived the message. I did not respond. I'm 26 now. I've been promoted twice at the firm. I moved out of the basement apartment last year and into a 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor with 2 windows and a small balcony, where I've managed to keep 2 plants alive for 8 consecutive months, which I consider a genuine personal achievement. I have a cat named Miso who is deeply suspicious of strangers and sits on my laptop whenever I'm trying to use it, and is, without question, one of the great loves of my life. I have Odette, who will drive from Mississauga with wine and snacks, if I text her the right combination of words. I have my colleague with the real questions, who has become the kind of friend you make when you're finally willing to actually be known. I have Mamie, who calls me on Sunday evenings without fail and always ends with, "Dis-moi quelque chose de beau." Tell me something beautiful. My parents and I talk occasionally. Holidays, mostly. There is a card at Christmas signed in my mother's looping handwriting, usually with a gift card to a place she thinks I like. Sometimes the right one. My father calls on my birthday and asks how work is going and tells me about the roads project he's overseeing. They're not bad conversations. They're just not close ones. Felix and I have coffee when I go back to Sault Ste. Marie. He's 22 now, and something has settled in him that wasn't there when we were younger. He told me once over mediocre coffee at a place near the old rink that he always knew something was off. That he used to feel guilty about it for years. I told him what I meant, that what happened wasn't his fault any more than it was mine. He's just a person who was handed something without being asked if he wanted it. That's its own complicated thing to carry. I wrote about all of it because I knew there were people out there who needed to read it. Not for drama, not for validation from strangers, but because silence is its own kind of weight. And I had been carrying mine for a very long time, and the moment I set it down, even just a little, I could finally feel how heavy it had been. If you grew up in a house where you had to earn your place, if you watched someone else receive what should have been shared, if you learned to make yourself smaller just to keep the peace, if you cried alone in a university parking lot and then straightened up and went back to class because there was nobody to celebrate with, and tomorrow was still coming regardless. You're not wrong for noticing. You never were. The hardest thing I ever did wasn't leaving or building something new, or disputing a fraudulent government claim at midnight in December. The hardest thing was letting myself believe, over and over, on the ordinary days when nobody was watching, that what I was building was worth building, that I was worth the effort, that the life I was making from the ground up, with Tim Hortons paychecks and library bursary forms, and an absolutely insufferable spreadsheet habit, was a real life, a full one, mine. I still kept myself apologizing for taking up space. I still shrink sometimes in rooms where I have every right to be. Those things don't disappear. But neither does the part of you that kept going anyway. That's still there too. I promise you it is. And for what it's worth, the plants are still alive. The cat is asleep on the chair across from me. The light is good today. That's something.